That morning I didn't know that one flower my daughter sold would change our lives forever. That morning still lives in my memory, like it happened yesterday. The light that crept through the thin curtains of our tiny apartment was soft and gray, falling across the cracks in the floor like faded scars. The air smelled faintly of soap and damp walls, clean but tired. I'd already been awake for hours, scrubbing tables at a diner that paid just enough to keep the lights on, but not enough to let me rest easy. When I came home, my 8-year-old daughter, Lily, was sitting on the edge of our worn-out bed, carefully wrapping the small bouquets she'd made from discarded flowers she'd picked up behind the local market. Her small fingers worked with the kind of care that only children who've learned the weight of struggle carry. She hummed quietly as she tied each bunch with a piece of ribbon. Cheap, faded ribbon that we'd bought in bulk months ago. That sight broke me a little every time. I wanted to tell her she didn't need to do this, that it wasn't her job to worry about bills or groceries or rent notices slipped under our door. But she knew. Kids like her always know. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. "Don't worry, Mama," she said, her voice bright and sure. "Someone's going to buy all of them today. I can feel it." That kind of faith, it was both beautiful and painful to watch. By the time we left for her usual corner, the one at Maple and 3rd, the city had already started its daily rush. People moved like clockwork, coffee in hand, eyes on their phones, ignoring everything that didn't serve their own little worlds. No one ever really looked at Lily. She'd stand there every day, her small cardboard sign in front of her, $2 per flower, her tiny smile trying to compete with the indifference of strangers. I always watched from across the street when I could, pretending to browse the fruit stand so she wouldn't feel smothered. It hurt to see her try so hard to sell something so small to people who didn't even glance her way. But that was our life, humble, honest, and invisible. Around noon, the heat was already unbearable. I was about to call her back home when I noticed a black car slowing down near her stand. It wasn't just any car. It was the kind of car that didn't belong in this part of town. The paint gleamed like glass, and the tires were spotless, like they'd never touched dirt. The tinted window rolled down. For a second, all I could see was my own reflection in the glass. Then a man leaned forward from the back seat. He looked to be in his 40s, dressed in a crisp gray suit that probably cost more than our rent for a year. His hair was neat, his expression unreadable, but his eyes were focused on Lily. He said something to her that I couldn't hear over the noise of the street. Lily smiled shyly and held out her basket, her little fingers trembling as she offered him one of her flowers. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a wallet, and handed her a bill. Too big for a single flower, even from across the street I could tell. But then I saw her shake her head. My breath caught. She was refusing it. She pointed to the cardboard sign again. $2 per flower. The man paused, then laughed softly. It wasn't a mocking laugh, but the kind that escapes when someone's caught off guard. He reached back into his wallet, pulled out $2 bills, and handed them to her. She gave him one small yellow daisy, the kind most people would have thrown away, and he took it carefully, as if it was something precious. And just like that, the car drove away. Lily turned to me across the street, waving the 2 bills in the air like she'd just won the lottery. I smiled and waved back, though something about the whole moment left a strange heaviness in my chest. That night, Lily couldn't stop talking about him. "He said my flowers were special," she told me while brushing her doll's hair. "He said people forget to look at small things that are beautiful." I didn't think much of it then. Rich people sometimes tried to feel good about themselves by being kind for a moment. I figured he was just another stranger who'd forget her name before his car reached the next streetlight. But the next morning, when I walked her to that same corner again, I noticed something that made me stop cold. That same car, the same glossy black car pulling up to the same curb. The window rolled down again, and the same man stepped out. He wasn't wearing a suit this time. Just a clean white shirt, sleeves rolled up, watch gleaming on his wrist. He looked out of place, like a movie character who'd taken a wrong turn into the real world. He crouched down to talk to Lily again, his expression softer now, almost hesitant. She laughed at something he said, and I watched from a distance as he listened, really listened to her, the way adults rarely do with children. It wasn't pity, it wasn't amusement, it was curiosity. After a moment, he bought another flower, and before he left, I saw him glance in my direction, just for a second. His gaze lingered longer than it should have, and then he nodded, almost as if he knew who I was. That night, Lily asked if I thought he'd come back again. I told her probably not. Men like him don't come back, sweetheart, I said softly. They live in a world that doesn't touch ours. She nodded, curling up under her blanket, her little fingers still smelling faintly of flowers. But I stayed awake long after she fell asleep, staring out the window at the streetlights blinking through the fog. Something about that man unsettled me. The way he looked at her, the strange calm in his eyes, the feeling that this wasn't random. I didn't know it then, but I was right, because that man in the black car wasn't done with us. He was just getting started. I didn't know then that this man would turn our lives upside down. He stepped out of a car worth more than everything I owned, yet he looked at my daughter like she was the only thing that mattered. The next morning started like every other. Coffee that tasted burnt, rent notices I didn't want to open, and a quiet prayer that today would somehow be better than yesterday. I walked Lily back to her usual corner, her small hand gripping mine tightly as we crossed the street. She was humming again, that same tune she always sang when she felt hopeful. I didn't have the heart to tell her hope didn't pay bills. By the time I got to the other side of Maple and 3rd, I noticed something that made my chest tighten. The same black car. It was parked a few feet away from Lily's stand, its engine silent this time. My stomach twisted with unease. People like him didn't visit the same place twice. The door opened, and there he was again, the man from yesterday. He stepped out slowly, like someone used to commanding attention without asking for it. His suit was immaculate, his shoes spotless, his hair perfectly in place despite the wind. He didn't belong here. Not on this corner, not in this part of town where sidewalks cracked and dreams faded with the paint. But there he was, standing in front of my little girl, looking at her the way a man looks when he's just seen something he didn't know he was missing. I stayed where I was, half hidden behind the fruit stand across the street, my pulse rising with every step he took toward her. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm, deep, steady, the kind that carries power, even when it whispers. Lily looked up, her smile bright and open. "You came back," she said. "I told you your flowers were special," he replied. "I couldn't stop thinking about them." She giggled softly, that shy, honest laugh of hers that could make even the hardest heart soften. She held out her basket again. $2 each, she said, proud and professional like a tiny businesswoman. He smiled, crouching down so his eyes met hers. I remember. He took a few flowers this time, daisies, roses, even one that was barely holding together, and handed her a crisp bill. I couldn't see the amount, but I knew it was more than he should have paid. Still, Lily shook her head. "It's too much," she said, pushing it back toward him. He studied her for a moment, surprised. Most adults wouldn't have said no to that kind of money, much less a child. Then, slowly, he pulled out a few smaller bills and handed her exactly what she'd asked for. $2 per flower, he said. She smiled wide, her dimples showing. "Thank you, sir. You remind me of someone," he said quietly. Lily tilted her head, curious. "Someone who likes flowers, too?" He didn't answer right away. He just smiled faintly, almost sadly. "Something like that," he said. Then straightened his tie and turned, toward his car. I thought that was it, that he'd leave again like the day before. But before stepping inside, he paused. His gaze shifted across the street, to me. Our eyes met. It was only for a second, but something in that look froze me. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't pity either. It was recognition. Like he knew me somehow. Or thought he did. Then, without another word, he got into his car, and the driver pulled away. The moment he disappeared, I rushed over to Lily, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. "What did he say to you?" She looked up, confused. "Nothing bad, Mama. He's nice. He just said I remind him of someone." I tried to steady my breathing. "You shouldn't talk too long to strangers, sweetheart." "He's not a stranger," she said simply. "He bought my flowers twice." I wanted to argue, to explain that kindness could be dangerous when it came from people who had too much of it to give away. But I stopped myself. How could I make an 8-year-old understand something even I didn't fully understand? That night, while she slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The city outside hummed with the sound of late-night traffic and faraway sirens. I kept seeing his face, the calm confidence, the strange softness in his eyes. There was something about him that didn't fit the world he came from. Something off-script, unpolished. I tried to convince myself it didn't matter. But deep down, I knew that look. People with money didn't look at people like us that way unless they wanted something. And sure enough, the next day, he came back. This time, I didn't watch from afar. I walked with Lily to her corner, pretending to rearrange her flowers while my eyes kept scanning the street. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. I almost thought maybe he wasn't coming. But then I heard it. The quiet purr of that same engine. The car stopped beside us. Lily's face lit up. "He's here," she whispered. The door opened, and he stepped out again, this time carrying a small paper bag from a bakery across town, the expensive kind. He crouched beside Lily and handed it to her. "I brought you something," he said. She peeked inside, her eyes widening. "Cookies?" He nodded. "You can't sell flowers on an empty stomach." She grinned, and I realized then. He wasn't just passing by. He was deliberately showing up. I cleared my throat, stepping forward. "Excuse me," I said. He stood, his posture straight but relaxed. "You must be her mother." "Yes," I said, folding my arms. "And you are?" "Daniel Carter," he replied, offering his hand. "I run Carter Holdings." The name meant nothing to me at the time, but his tone carried the kind of weight that told me it should have. I shook his hand, more out of politeness than comfort. "She's a remarkable child," he said, glancing down at Lily. "She has integrity. That's rare." I didn't know what to say. To that, compliments from men like him never came free. "She just works hard," I said carefully. He smiled faintly. "I can see that." Then his tone shifted, softer, almost hesitant. "What about her father?" The question caught me off guard. My shoulders stiffened. "He passed away," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. Something flickered in his eyes. Grief, maybe recognition? I couldn't tell. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "That must have been hard." "It was," I replied. "Still is." He nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to the flowers. "She said her favorite are lilies." "They're her namesake," I said. "She was named after them." He smiled again, but it wasn't quite a happy smile. "Fitting," he murmured. "Strong. Resilient." There was a pause, long enough for me to feel the weight of his silence pressing down on me. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small silver case. He took out a card and held it toward me. "Here," he said. "Call me tomorrow. I have an offer that might help you both." I stared at the card, its embossed letters catching the sunlight. Daniel Carter, CEO, Carter Holdings. "What kind of offer?" I asked cautiously. "The kind that could change your daughter's future," he said. Before I could respond, he turned back toward his car, gave Lily a small nod, and disappeared into the traffic once again. I stood there, the card trembling slightly in my hand. Lily tugged at my sleeve. "Mama," she said softly. "He said people like us deserve a little help sometimes." I looked down at her bright, innocent face, and forced a smile. "Maybe," I whispered. "But help like that usually comes with a price." That night, I placed the card on the table and just stared at it for hours. I didn't know what kind of man Daniel Carter really was, but something told me his kind of help could change everything, whether I wanted it to or not. He left without another word, but the next day he came back. And that's when things got strange. He said he wanted to help us, but I couldn't shake the feeling that help always came with a price. The business card sat on our kitchen table all night, catching the glow of the streetlight that bled through the thin curtains. I must have picked it up a dozen times, tracing the gold letters with my finger. Daniel Carter, CEO, Carter Holdings. It felt like a ticket to a world I didn't belong in, one I wasn't sure I even wanted to enter. I didn't sleep. I just kept thinking about what he'd said. An offer that could change your daughter's future. By morning, the card still lay there. I made coffee and stared at it like it might somehow explain itself. Lily came out of her room, still rubbing sleep from her eyes, her braid loose from the night before. "You're thinking about him again," she said, grinning. I forced a small laugh. "You shouldn't notice things like that." "He's nice, Mama," she said simply. "He bought my flowers and gave me cookies." I wanted to tell her that the world wasn't that simple, that people like Daniel Carter didn't just show up out of kindness, but her innocence stopped me. So instead I just said, "Finish your breakfast, sweetheart." By noon, I gave in. Maybe curiosity got the better of me, or maybe desperation did. Either way, I dialed the number printed on the card. A woman's voice answered. "Carter Holdings, how may I direct your call?" My throat went dry. I was told to call Mr. Carter. This is Lily's mother." The woman's tone changed immediately. "Of course, ma'am. He's expecting your call." "Expecting me?" Within seconds, she gave me an address, an office downtown in one of those glass buildings that reflect sunlight like it belongs to them. My palms were sweating even as I wrote it down. I told myself I wasn't doing anything wrong, just seeing what he wanted. But deep down, I knew this was more than a meeting. It was a turning point. When I got to the building, I felt completely out of place. Everything shone. The marble floors, the mirrored walls, even the people. They all looked like they belonged in a magazine spread about success. I caught a glimpse of myself in the reflection. Plain blouse, cheap shoes, the kind of weariness that can't be hidden. For a moment, I almost turned back. But then I remembered Lily's smile, the way she looked when she believed something good was coming. So I stepped into the elevator. When the doors opened, a receptionist greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Carter is waiting for you," she said. I followed her down a hallway lined with abstract art I couldn't make sense of. When she opened the door to his office, the view alone made me stop. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the entire city, the skyline stretching endlessly like another world. And there he was, standing by the glass, hands in his pockets, the sunlight cutting across his face. "Mrs. Turner," he said as he turned, his voice calm, controlled. "Thank you for coming." I nodded awkwardly. "You said you had an offer." He gestured toward the chair across from his desk. "Please sit." The chair was soft, too soft. It made me feel small, like a child in a grown-up's world. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the desk. "Your daughter," he began slowly, "is extraordinary." My chest tightened. "She's just a kid who sells flowers." He smiled faintly. "No, she's more than that. She has something that money can't buy, honesty, grace, the kind of light people don't see anymore." I didn't know what to say. Compliments like that felt foreign, almost dangerous. "What exactly are you offering, Mr. Carter?" He opened a folder and slid a few papers toward me. "I want Lily to be part of a project we're launching. A campaign to represent hope, perseverance, and kindness. It's a program designed to highlight real stories of resilience. Your daughter would be the face of it." I blinked, trying to process what he'd just said. "You want her to work for you?" "In a way," he said. "She'd be part of our foundation's outreach, photos, videos, maybe even public events. Nothing harmful. Everything supervised." I hesitated, scanning the pages. It looked official. Contracts, clauses, signatures. Why her? You could pick anyone. He studied me quietly for a moment. Because she reminds me of what I used to believe in, he said finally. Before I forgot. There was something in his voice. Something human, raw, almost painful. But I couldn't let emotion cloud my judgment. I don't want pity, I said firmly. We're not a charity case. This isn't charity, he replied quickly. It's opportunity. She'll have access to schooling, resources, and security. And you'll receive compensation as her guardian. Compensation? The word hit like an echo of shame. I can't just sign something I don't understand, I said, trying to sound stronger than I felt. Of course, he said. Take your time. But understand. This could change everything for you both. He slid a pen across the table. I stared at it. I thought of our apartment, of unpaid bills, of nights I'd prayed for a miracle that never came. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the door we'd been waiting for. I picked up the pen, my hand trembling. And this won't hurt her? On the contrary, he said softly. It'll give her the future she deserves. His eyes held mine, steady and unwavering. I wanted to look away, but something about his certainty pulled me in. It was like he already knew I'd say yes. And maybe, somewhere deep inside, I already had. I signed. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was small, but it felt enormous. When I handed the contract back, he smiled. Not the polite smile I'd seen before, but something gentler. You've made the right choice, he said. I wanted to believe him. As I left his office, my reflection flickered in the glass walls. One version of me walking out, another left behind, still unsure. That night, Lily couldn't stop smiling. She twirled around our tiny room, pretending to be on a stage, her laughter filling the air like music. Mr. Carter said I get to help people, she said, eyes bright. He said flowers aren't the only thing that can make people happy. I smiled back, but something inside me tightened. I wanted to share her joy, to believe that this was good, that it was safe. But even as I tucked her into bed, I couldn't ignore the thought gnawing at me. Good things don't just happen to people like us, not without a reason. He handed me his card and said, "Call me tomorrow, I have an offer." And I signed that paper, without knowing what I'd just agreed to. When a man like him gives you hope, you start to wonder what he really wants in return. The next morning, the world felt different. Not brighter, not lighter, just different. There was a sense of something new hanging in the air, like the quiet after a storm, when you're not sure if it's really over. The contract I'd signed the day before lay folded neatly inside my purse, and every time I thought about it, a strange mixture of guilt and relief settled in my chest. Lily was radiant. She woke up humming, dressed herself carefully, and spent nearly an hour fixing the ribbons on her little flower basket before I reminded her she didn't need to sell anymore. "Mr. Carter said I don't have to?" she asked, her voice full of wonder. I nodded, trying to smile. "Not for now, sweetheart. You have bigger things coming." She squealed and hugged me so tightly that I almost forgot to be scared. Almost. By noon, I was standing outside Carter Holdings again, this time by invitation. His assistant led me through the same gleaming lobby, her heels clicking on the marble floor like a metronome. The air smelled of polished wood and power. When I entered Daniel Carter's office, he was already waiting, standing near the window like he owned the horizon. "Mrs. Turner," he said, turning with a faint smile. "I trust you've had time to think." I held up the contract. "I thought about it all night." "And?" "I signed," I said quietly. "I just hope I didn't make a mistake." He nodded once, as though he already knew. "You didn't, I promise you that." He gestured toward a seat, and I sat, clutching my purse tightly. "You're about to step into a different world," he said. "There'll be photographers, media, people asking questions. I'll make sure you both have everything you need to be comfortable." Comfortable wasn't a word I'd used in years. It sounded foreign. "I don't want her used," I said quickly. "I don't want her turned into a story for your company. He looked at me for a long moment before answering. "You have my word," he said softly. "This isn't about publicity. It's about redemption. Mine, maybe, in some way." That last word, redemption, lingered in the air longer than it should have. I wanted to ask him what he meant, but his expression told me not to. Instead, he handed me an envelope. Inside were several papers, school enrollment forms, account details, even an apartment lease. "You'll move into a better place," he said. "Closer to Lily's new school." I froze. "You found us a new apartment?" "I did," he said simply. "It's paid for. Consider it part of the arrangement." A part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to cry. It was too much, too fast. People like him didn't hand out miracles. There was always a reason. "Why are you doing this?" I asked quietly. He paused, his eyes softening just enough to make me doubt everything I thought I knew about him. "Because sometimes the past doesn't let you move forward until you make something right." That answer made no sense to me then, but it would later. The following weeks were a blur. Everything happened at once. New clothes for Lily, meetings with photographers, forms to sign, interviews to schedule. It was overwhelming, but in a way that felt almost unreal. Every time I watched Lily smile for the cameras, holding a bouquet of flowers with that effortless grace she had, I told myself this was worth it. She was happy. She was safe. That was all that mattered. Daniel checked in often. Too often. Sometimes it was through his assistant, sometimes in person. He always arrived with quiet confidence, dressed like success itself, yet there was something heavy behind his eyes. Something unspoken. One afternoon, I found him standing outside the studio while Lily was inside being filmed for a short feature. His sleeves were rolled up, his tie loosened. He looked tired, the kind of tired that doesn't come from work, but from guilt. "She's a natural," he said softly. "You must be proud." "I am," I replied cautiously. "But I'm still trying to understand why any of this is happening." He turned toward me, his gaze steady. "Because good things should happen to good people once in a while," he said. "Don't question it too much." But how could I not? He walked me to the car afterward, and for the first time, I noticed something I hadn't before. A faint scar along his jawline, like a reminder of something violent and buried. I wanted to ask, but his eyes dared me not to. That night, after putting Lily to bed in our new apartment, a real apartment, with warm lights and clean walls, I stood at the window looking down at the city. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. But I didn't feel safe either. There's a danger in comfort when you've lived too long without it. It makes you suspicious. It makes you wonder when the price will show up. And with Daniel Carter, I knew there would be one. A few days later, Lily came home from school with a small note in her backpack. It was from Daniel, written in his precise, almost old-fashioned handwriting. "Your daughter has the same eyes as someone I once knew. Take care of her. The world doesn't deserve her light." I read it 3 times, feeling the words settle like ice under my skin. Someone he once knew. Who? Why her? The questions started to multiply faster than I could silence them. Still, I kept telling myself this was just gratitude, maybe even admiration. But in the back of my mind, I could feel something darker twisting beneath it. Something I couldn't name yet. I poured myself a glass of water, stared at my reflection in the window, and whispered, "Don't fall for it. Don't believe it's free." But I had already taken the first step into his world, and by the time I realized what that truly meant, it was too late to turn back. I signed that paper, and I had no idea what I'd just agreed to. When he showed me that old photograph, my heart stopped, because the man standing beside him was my husband. The photograph wouldn't leave my hands. I must have stared at it for an hour, the paper trembling between my fingers. Every detail felt like a knife. The construction helmets, the half-finished building in the background, the dirt on my husband's face. The way his smile looked so certain, so alive, and standing beside him, looking younger but unmistakably the same, was Daniel Carter. He hadn't told me the truth. Not once. I felt sick. The air in the room felt too heavy to breathe. I waited until Lily was asleep that night before calling him. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. When he answered, his voice was calm, almost gentle. "I was expecting this call," he said quietly. "Then you know why I'm calling," I snapped. There was a pause, the kind that feels longer than it really is. "You saw the photo." "You worked with my husband," I said, my voice trembling. "You stood beside him the day before he died. You looked me in the eye and pretended you didn't know him." He exhaled sharply, like the weight of years was pressing against his chest. "I didn't pretend," he said softly. "I just didn't know how to start." "Start what?" I demanded. "Lying to me again?" "Explaining," he said, his voice breaking just slightly, "because nothing I say will sound like enough." He asked to meet in person. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The next evening, we met in the same office where this all began. He wasn't wearing his usual tailored armor this time. No suit, no tie. Just a man who looked exhausted, haunted by something he couldn't shake. He placed a file on the desk between us. "Your husband and I worked together," he began. "He was one of the most loyal men I ever met. Smart, honest, too honest for the business we were in." I stayed silent, staring at him through the storm building in my chest. "The company we worked for was cutting corners," he continued, "ignoring safety reports, rushing projects. Michael, your husband, spoke up. He filed complaints, reported violations, but nobody wanted to listen. He made enemies for doing the right thing." I felt tears burning behind my eyes. "And where were you, Daniel?" He looked down, ashamed. "I was part of management then. I saw what was happening, but I didn't stop it. I didn't fight for him the way I should have." My voice cracked. "So you're saying he died because of your company?" His eyes met mine, full of guilt. "Because of me." The words landed like a blow. He opened the file and slid it toward me. Inside were reports, photographs, and official statements. I recognized my husband's name highlighted across the pages. Michael Turner, site supervisor. The report dated 2 weeks before the accident had his handwriting at the bottom. "Site foundation unstable, needs immediate inspection." And stamped over it in red. Filed. No action taken. I covered my mouth with my hand as the tears finally came. "He tried to stop it." "He did," Daniel said softly. "He tried to save them. And the day the building collapsed, he was there because he refused to leave until everyone else got out." Silence stretched between us, the kind that hurts to sit in. "I owed him my life," Daniel said finally. "He pulled me out of that wreckage. I broke my ribs, my leg. He didn't make it out." My vision blurred. I pressed my hand against my chest like I could hold my heart together with pressure alone. He looked away, his voice low. "I've spent every day since trying to make it right. That's why I came to find you. Not to pity you, but because I couldn't live with what I'd done. Or what I hadn't done. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hate him. But all I could feel was the unbearable weight of the truth. The kind that doesn't give relief, only clarity. "So that's what this was," I whispered. "The contract, the foundation, the kindness, guilt." He shook his head, eyes glistening. "It started that way. Maybe. But then I met Lily. I saw him in her. The same courage, the same light. I didn't plan this, but she gave me something I didn't think I deserved anymore. A second chance to do right by him." Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let them fall. "You don't get to use my daughter for your redemption." "I'm not," he said. "I just wanted to give her the future he never got to see." I stood, shaking. "You had your chance, Daniel. You can't rewrite the past by buying the present." He didn't try to stop me when I turned to leave. His voice followed me as I reached the door. "I know," he said quietly. "But there's one more thing you don't know yet." I froze. "What could possibly be left?" I asked, not turning around. His voice cracked as he said it. "He didn't die right away, Grace. Your husband was alive when I found him, and he said your name. He asked me to find you, to take care of you and Lily. I stood there, frozen, every word sinking like lead into my chest. He whispered one last thing. I kept that promise, even if it took me 10 years to do it. I walked out before I broke. That night, I sat in silence while the city lights flickered through the window. The truth was out, but it didn't set me free. It just made everything heavier. But there was one more secret he hadn't told me, one that would change everything. Was he trying to fix his guilt? Or was I just part of a story he needed to rewrite? After that night, I couldn't tell what was real anymore. The truth should have brought clarity. But instead, it made everything blur. I kept seeing that photograph in my head. My husband, Michael, standing beside Daniel Carter. Both of them smiling. Both of them unaware that one of their lives was about to end, and the other would be haunted by it forever. For days, I didn't answer Daniel's calls. I didn't reply to his messages. Every knock on the door made my heart jump. Every shadow outside made me hold my breath, because now I knew who he was. And worse, what he'd done. But something didn't add up. If guilt was his motive, why now? Why come back after all these years? Why not leave us alone like he had every right to? The morning after our last conversation, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink. The city outside was alive. Cars, people, sound. But my world felt completely still. Lily walked in wearing her new school uniform, her backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder. "Mama," she said softly, "Mr. Carter called again." My stomach tightened. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him you were resting," she said, looking uncertain. "He said he's sorry for making you sad." I looked at her, at the innocence in her eyes, the light her father had left behind, and I realized something terrifying. She didn't see Daniel as the man who had caused us pain. To her, he was the man who had changed our lives for the better. That night, I found myself standing outside his office again. I didn't know what I wanted. An apology, an explanation, maybe both. The receptionist looked startled when I walked in without an appointment. But she didn't stop me. She must have seen something in my eyes. Daniel was alone when I entered. The city lights glowed behind him, turning his silhouette into something both powerful and fragile. When he saw me, his face softened with something close to relief. "You came," he said quietly. "Don't flatter yourself," I replied. "I came for answers." He gestured to the seat across from him, but I didn't sit. "Why now?" I demanded. "Why after all this time? You didn't come back for him? You came back for you." He didn't deny it. "Maybe I did," he said. "Maybe I couldn't carry it anymore. I've spent years building something on a lie. I thought I could outrun it, bury it under money and success. But then I saw her, Lily. She has his eyes, Grace, his spirit. It was like seeing the past walk toward me and ask for justice." My heart twisted. "You think helping us erases what you did?" He shook his head. "No. But I thought maybe it could mean something. Maybe if I gave her the future he wanted, it would be something close to redemption." Redemption. The word hung between us like smoke, thick, suffocating, impossible to grasp. "Then why lie to me?" I asked quietly. "Why hide that you knew him?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Because I didn't want you to see me as the man who let him die. I wanted to be someone who could still do good." I let out a bitter laugh. "You can't rewrite the past just by changing the ending, Daniel. You can't turn guilt into grace because it feels better." He looked up, his eyes glistening under the office light. "Maybe not. But I can make sure his story doesn't end with a lie." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He walked around the desk, picking up a file. "There's more you don't know," he said, his tone quieter now. "Michael wasn't just a victim of that collapse. He was blamed for it." I froze. "Blamed?" He nodded grimly. "The company's lawyers fabricated evidence, falsified reports, altered documents. They pinned the entire incident on him to protect the executives. And I let them." My stomach dropped. "So the world thought he caused it? Yes, he whispered. And that's my fault. I felt the air leave my lungs. For years, I'd lived with that unspoken shame. The pitying looks, the neighbors who never said it out loud but always wondered if he'd been careless. I'd buried that pain so deep I'd almost convinced myself it didn't matter. But now, hearing it out loud, it all came rushing back. I turned away before he could see my face crumble. He stepped closer, his voice softer. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to clear his name publicly. I'll take responsibility for everything. I shook my head. You think a confession will fix 10 years of lies? No, he said, but it will start something. It will end the story the right way. I stared at him, searching for sincerity in his eyes. For once, I didn't see the CEO. I saw a broken man, the kind who carries a cross too heavy to ever set down. Why tell me this? I asked finally. Why not just do it? Because I needed you to know before the world does, he said. You and Lily deserve to hear the truth from me. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. But something about his tone, steady, rehearsed, made me wonder if this was still about us, or about his legacy. Was he trying to fix his guilt, I thought, or was I just part of a story he needed to rewrite? The next few weeks felt like living underwater. News started spreading, articles, press releases, interviews. Daniel Carter was becoming the face of redemption, the CEO seeking forgiveness for a tragedy buried by time. Reporters called it the most courageous act of corporate truth-telling in a decade. They called him a hero. And me? I was the quiet widow, the nameless woman behind the story. Every headline made my stomach twist tighter. The world was falling in love with his redemption arc, and I couldn't stop wondering if that had been his plan all along. But Lily didn't see it that way. She was proud of him. He's trying to help people like Daddy, she said one night. He's good, Mama. He's really good. I smiled for her, but the truth sat heavy in my chest. Because, sometimes, the line between redemption and manipulation isn't just thin, it's invisible. And I was starting to realize that Daniel Carter didn't just want forgiveness. He wanted control of the narrative. That realization hit me hard one night at his company's charity gala, the event he'd invited us to, calling it a celebration of second chances. Cameras flashed. Journalists swarmed. He gave a speech that had the audience in tears about truth, accountability, and the power of grace. He mentioned Michael's name, called him a hero, and when the crowd stood to applaud, I felt something inside me snap. Because I finally saw what this was. This wasn't closure, this was performance. He wasn't just rewriting history, he was starring in it. As the applause faded, I stepped outside, the cool night air biting my skin. My heart was racing. And then I heard it. Two voices near the side of the building, hushed but urgent. His assistants. She can't ever know, one whispered. The real reason, the other replied. If she finds out, it's over. I froze. The real reason. What hadn't he told me? The blood drained from my face as I backed away from the corner, my heart pounding. He had lied before. What if he was still lying now? I looked up at the glowing Carter Holdings logo above the building, and in that moment, one truth became terrifyingly clear. I had trusted the wrong man. Again. Until one night, I overheard his assistant saying, "She can never know the real reason." He said he wanted to make things right, but the truth he finally confessed nearly broke me. I couldn't sleep that night. Those words I'd overheard. She can never know the real reason. Looped in my mind until they stopped sounding human and started feeling like a warning. For 2 days, I tried to convince myself it meant nothing. Maybe they were talking about company secrets or press strategy or something that had nothing to do with me. But deep down, I already knew better. The only she Daniel's team ever whispered about was me. By the third night, the silence became unbearable. I called his office and demanded to see him. His assistant hesitated before transferring the call. When his voice came through the line, it was calm. too calm. "Grace," he said quietly, "you've been avoiding me." "I need answers," I said, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. "You told me the truth, or at least I thought you did. But now I hear your people saying there's more. So tell me, Daniel, what are you still hiding?" There was a long pause before he replied. "Come by tonight, after hours. We'll talk." I didn't even hesitate. When I arrived, the building was mostly dark, except for the glow from his office on the top floor. The elevator ride felt endless. When the doors opened, he was standing by the window, his reflection framed against the city lights. The skyline stretching, endlessly behind him, beautiful and cold. He didn't turn when I entered. "You weren't supposed to hear that," he said quietly. "I did," I snapped, "and I'm done with your half-truths. You owe me everything now, all of it. No more soft lies, no more speeches about redemption. Tell me the truth." He turned then, slowly, his face pale and drawn. I could see the guilt sitting in his eyes like a shadow he couldn't hide anymore. "You want the truth?" he said finally, his voice lower, heavier. "Then you'll get it, but it's not the story you think it is." He gestured toward a chair, but I stayed standing. I didn't want comfort. I wanted honesty. "When the accident happened," he began, "I told you your husband was a hero, and that was true. But what I didn't tell you was what happened after." I crossed my arms. "You said he was blamed, that your company covered it up." "Yes," he said quietly. "But I didn't tell you who made that decision." I stared at him, a chill creeping up my spine. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything before he even spoke. "It was me," he said. "I was the one who signed off on the report that blamed him." The world tilted. For a second I couldn't hear anything. Not his voice, not the city outside. Just the sound of my own heartbeat, pounding like thunder in my chest. "You," I whispered. "You destroyed his name." His eyes glistened. "I didn't know the full truth back then. I was young, scared. The board was threatening to shut everything down, and they needed a name to pin it on. They told me it was just paperwork, that the insurance would cover the families. I didn't realize what I was agreeing to until it was too late." I shook my head, my voice cracking. "You let the world think my husband was responsible for killing people. You let me bury him with that shame." "I know," he said softly, "and I've carried that every day since." I laughed, a sound so bitter it hurt. "You carried it? You?" "I carried it, Daniel. I raised our daughter while people whispered about how her father cut corners. I worked myself to the bone trying to prove we weren't like the rumors said. And all this time, you knew the truth." He stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Grace, please, I can't undo what I did, but I can tell the world the truth now. I'm preparing to go public. I'm going to release everything, the reports, the falsified documents, the names of everyone involved. It'll destroy me, but it'll clear him." I stared at him through tears. "Why now? After 10 years of silence?" "Because the story's coming out either way," he said. "Reporters are digging. If they find it without context, Michael's name will be buried all over again. I want to tell it right. I want to tell it for him." I turned away, shaking, trying to breathe. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that this was finally about justice, not guilt. But every time I thought about the way he'd looked at me that first day, the way he'd reinserted himself into our lives, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was still about him. "You're doing this to save yourself," I said quietly. He didn't deny it. "Maybe," he whispered, "but that doesn't mean it isn't the right thing to do." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The city hummed outside, alive and indifferent. Finally, I said, "You'll never know what you took from me, from us. You didn't just ruin his reputation. You stole the peace we could have had." He swallowed hard. "Then let me give it back." I turned toward the door, my voice shaking. "You can't." "Grace," he called out as I reached for the handle. "I know you can't forgive me, but please, when this comes out, tell Lily her father was innocent. She deserves to know that truth from you, not from the news." I didn't answer. I walked out, my steps echoing down the marble hallway, my hands trembling so hard I could barely hold my purse. By the time I reached the street, the night air hit me like ice. I leaned against the cold brick wall and closed my eyes. The truth was out now, brutal, ugly, complete, but it didn't set me free. It just left me standing in the ruins of two men's sins, one who died for integrity and one who sold it to survive. And I couldn't tell which one haunted me more. I felt betrayed all over again. How could I trust him after this? When lies and kindness collide, it's hard to know which one hurts more. After that night, something inside me broke. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It just hums quietly inside you, steady and deep, like the sound of electricity in a dark room. That's what it felt like every time I thought about Daniel, every time I looked at Lily, every time I remembered the truth. He had given us everything, but it was all built on a lie. For weeks, I tried to pretend life was normal. Lily still went to school. I still worked part-time at the cafe. The world kept spinning, pretending nothing had changed. But inside me, everything had. Each time the phone rang, I hoped it wasn't him. Each time it wasn't, I felt an ache I couldn't explain. I didn't want his voice, but I didn't want silence either. One evening, Lily came home from school, her face glowing with excitement. "Mama, look what Mr. Carter sent me," she said, holding up a new sketchbook and a box of colored pencils. My throat tightened. "You shouldn't take gifts from him anymore, sweetheart." She frowned, confused. "Why not? He's just being nice." I knelt beside her. "Because sometimes people give to feel better about what they've taken." She tilted her head. "But he didn't take anything from us." I couldn't answer. I didn't know how to explain betrayal to a child who still believed the world was kind. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after she went to bed, staring at the phone on the counter. His number glowed on the screen, waiting. I thought about calling him, screaming, crying, demanding more answers. But I didn't. Instead, I typed one short message. "Don't contact us again." Then I blocked his number. The next morning, I called Lily's school and told them she wouldn't be part of the foundation program anymore. The administrator sounded surprised. "Are you sure? She's one of our most promising students. The foundation covers everything. Tuition, supplies." "I'm sure," I interrupted. "We'll manage." And just like that, we were out. The money stopped coming. The flowers on the doorstep stopped showing up. The sleek black car never appeared again. For the first time in months, our lives were completely ours again. And for the first time in years, that terrified me. The following weeks were hard. I picked up extra shifts at the cafe. We sold the few nice things the foundation had given us. Our fridge went back to half empty. But even in the struggle, there was a strange kind of peace, like breathing air that hurt your lungs at first, but was finally clean. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about Daniel. Was he keeping his word? Was he really going public? Or was this all another version of the truth, carefully edited, beautifully packaged? One evening, I came home late, exhausted from a double shift. Lily was asleep on the couch, her homework scattered around her. I picked up her papers, tucking them neatly into her backpack. That's when I saw a folded note sticking out of one of her books. It was his handwriting. I froze. It wasn't long, just a few lines. "Grace, I respect your decision to walk away, but I need you to know that the announcement is coming soon. I'm releasing everything. Michael's name will be cleared. Daniel." The paper shook in my hands. I didn't know whether to cry or tear it apart. He was keeping his promise. But why did it feel like another invasion? I crumpled the note and threw it into the trash. Days passed. Then weeks. And for a moment, I let myself believe the storm was over. Until one morning, everything changed. I was making coffee, the kind of quiet morning routine that feels safe, predictable. The radio played softly in the background, a local news broadcast filling the apartment. I wasn't really listening. until I heard his name. Breaking news this morning: Daniel Carter, former CEO of Carter Holdings, has resigned amid reports of corporate misconduct dating back a decade. I froze, my hands trembling around the coffee mug. The announcer continued, "Sources close to the investigation say Carter is cooperating fully with federal authorities and has provided evidence that clears a former employee previously blamed for a construction accident years ago. That employee, the late Michael Turner, has been posthumously exonerated." The mug slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. Coffee spread across the tiles, dark and steaming, but I didn't move. Michael Turner, my husband. The world around me blurred. The reporter's voice kept going, but I could barely hear. Carter Holdings board released a statement confirming that the falsified reports were signed under Daniel Carter's direction. He has taken full responsibility, stating, quote, "The man they blamed was innocent. He was the only hero that day." I sank to the floor, my knees hitting the cold tile. My breath came in short, shaking gasps. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. For years, I'd dreamed of hearing those words. Michael Turner was innocent. But now that they were real, they didn't bring relief. They brought something heavier. Because it wasn't just the truth that had been buried. It was Daniel. He had destroyed everything he built to set things right. Lily came running from her room, alarmed by the sound of breaking glass. "Mama, what happened?" I wiped at my tears and forced a shaky smile. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just spilled my coffee." But she saw the radio. She heard the name. Her eyes widened. "Is he in trouble?" I didn't answer right away. "He told the truth," I finally said, "and sometimes telling the truth costs everything." She looked down, quiet for a moment. Then she said softly, "He kept his promise." I nodded. He did. We sat there together on the kitchen floor, surrounded by the smell of coffee and the echo of everything that had come before. Outside, the city was waking up. Inside, something in me finally began to settle. For the first time in years, I didn't feel anger. I just felt empty. Because sometimes, justice doesn't look like victory. Sometimes it looks like a man burning down his own kingdom to give someone else their name back. Until one morning, a news headline made me drop to my knees. He gave up everything to clear my husband's name, and I never even got to say goodbye. For days after the headline broke, the world wouldn't stop talking about Daniel Carter. Every channel, every newspaper, every blog had his name plastered across it. The CEO who came clean. The billionaire who lost it all for the truth. They called him brave. They called him foolish. They called him everything except what he really was. A man who finally did the right thing too late. The media turned his confession into a spectacle. They showed clips of him leaving the courthouse, head bowed, surrounded by reporters shouting questions he didn't answer. They analyzed his statement like it was some kind of poetic act of redemption. But to me, it wasn't poetry. It was pain. Because while the world was busy judging him, I was just trying to understand why it hurt so much. He had done exactly what he promised. He'd told the truth. He'd cleared Michael's name. He'd taken every ounce of blame and carried it on his own shoulders until it destroyed him. And then, he was gone. No one knew where. One day he was in front of cameras. The next he wasn't anywhere. His phone was disconnected. His apartment was empty. Carter Holdings had replaced him overnight, the company desperate to distance itself from the scandal. His name had become both a warning and a legend. But for me, it was just silence. For years, I had hated him for what he'd done, for the lies, the guilt, the intrusion into our lives. But when I saw his world collapse, when I realized he had traded everything he had to give back the truth he stole, I felt something I didn't expect. Gratitude. Not for the money, not even for the justice, but for the courage it must have taken to destroy himself in front of the world, just to make something right for a woman who no longer trusted him. I read his public statement over and over again. The man blamed was innocent. His name was Michael Turner. He was a hero. I failed him and his family. I built a life on that failure, and now I'm giving it all back. Every word felt like a confession and a farewell. I wish I could have told him that I believed him, that I finally understood. But life doesn't always give you a chance to say goodbye to the people who change it. Sometimes, all you get is their echo. A week later, a small package arrived at my door. No return address, just my name written in neat, deliberate handwriting. His handwriting. Inside was a single white lily, pressed flat between 2 sheets of paper. And a note. I told you once I wanted to make things right. I never said I'd make it easy. Tell Lily her father's name is clean. That's all that matters now. I held that letter to my chest and cried harder than I had in years. He had disappeared completely. No forwarding address, no trace, not even a rumor. It was as if he'd folded himself into the quiet and vanished. Lily didn't understand at first. "Will we ever see him again?" she asked one evening, her voice soft, uncertain. I looked at her, at the light in her eyes, the same light her father once had, and said, "Maybe not, but that's okay. Some people aren't meant to stay. They just come to fix what's broken, and then they go." She nodded slowly, as if she understood, even though I knew she didn't yet. That night, I placed the lily he'd sent inside Michael's old journal, the one filled with his sketches and ideas for the future he never got to build. I pressed the pages closed and whispered, "It's done. It's finally done." Outside, rain began to fall, soft, steady, almost gentle. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel anger or grief, just peace. Because in the end, Daniel Carter hadn't just given back a name. He'd given back a truth. He'd given back a life. When I went to thank him, I was told he'd disappeared. I thought he was done with us, until his last contract arrived, written not for money but for love. Months passed, and the world moved on. News stories faded, scandals shifted, and people found new names to praise or condemn. But for me and Lily, life became something simple again. Quiet mornings, school drop-offs, coffee that wasn't rushed, evenings spent watching the sunset through cracked apartment windows. It wasn't the life Daniel had built for us, but it was ours. Sometimes, when I walked past the flower market, I'd stop and look at the daisies, the same kind Lily once sold on the corner of Maple and 3rd. The vendors didn't know me anymore. I was just another face in the crowd, and I liked it that way. But every so often I'd think of him, the man who came into our lives like a storm, turned everything upside down, and then vanished. I wondered where he'd gone, whether he'd found peace, whether he ever forgave himself. It was early spring when the letter came. The envelope was thick, expensive, cream-colored, embossed with a seal I didn't recognize. It had no return address, only my name written in the same steady handwriting that had once left me breathless. Inside was a folded document, a small silver key, and a note. "Grace, you once said you didn't want a contract built on guilt. So I wrote another one. This one's written with purpose. I've started something new, a foundation in Michael's name. Not in mine, his. It will fund education for children who've lost parents to workplace accidents. It's already active. You and Lily don't owe me anything. But I owed him this. The key is to the office. It's yours now, if you ever want it. D." I didn't realize I was crying until the ink started to blur under my fingertips. He had kept his word again, not out of guilt this time, but out of love, the kind that asks for nothing back. Lily came running when she saw me standing in the kitchen with the letter. "Mama, what's wrong?" I smiled through tears and handed her the note. She read it carefully, her lips moving silently over every word. When she reached the end, she looked up with that same light in her eyes, her father's light. "He did it," she whispered. "He really did it." I nodded. "Yes, sweetheart, he did." A few weeks later, we visited the address written at the bottom of the page. It was a small office downtown. Nothing fancy, nothing corporate. Just a quiet space with a single sign on the glass door. The Turner Foundation. Inside, there were photographs of construction workers, families, and children smiling beside new homes and schools. And on the wall, framed in black and white, was a single picture. A man holding a flower, standing beside a little girl. Lily touched the frame gently. "That's me," she whispered. Beside it hung another photo, one I hadn't seen before. Michael and Daniel standing side by side at the same construction site from that old photograph. Only this one was different. This one had a quote underneath it. "Integrity is what you do when no one's watching. Redemption is what you do when they are." I stood there for a long time, my hand resting on the wall, my eyes blurring with tears. It hit me then. The story wasn't about guilt or forgiveness anymore. It was about continuation. About two men whose lives had collided through tragedy and somehow, years later, had rebuilt something good from the wreckage. When we left, Lily held the key in her hand. "Can we keep it, Mama?" she asked. "Yes," I said softly. "It's ours now." That night, I placed the letter and the key in Michael's old journal, beside the pressed lily Daniel had sent months before. It felt right, like the final piece of a puzzle I hadn't known I was still putting together. For the first time in years, I felt free. Daniel Carter was gone, but his presence lingered in quiet ways. In every child the foundation helped, in every scholarship given, in every life lifted from despair, and in the small apartment where a mother and daughter once lived in the shadow of loss, there was finally light. And then I saw him one last time. He came to buy a flower, but instead he planted a future that will never stop blooming. Years have passed since that day. Lily isn't the little girl who once stood on the corner of Maple and 3rd, her hands full of daisies and hope. She's 20 now, strong, brilliant, and determined to make the world a little softer than she found it. This morning she graduated from college, the first Turner to ever walk across a stage like that. When they called her name, Lily Turner, honors graduate, recipient of the Carter Foundation Scholarship, I couldn't stop the tears. The auditorium roared with applause, cameras flashed, and in that moment I saw not just my daughter, but every struggle, every night I thought we wouldn't make it, every ounce of love that kept us standing. After the ceremony, she found me in the crowd. "We did it, Mama," she said, smiling through her tears. "We sure did," I whispered, holding her tight. We walked outside into the sunlight. The air was warm, golden, alive. Families were laughing, students tossing caps into the air. And then, as we crossed the courtyard, I saw him, standing beneath a tree at the far end of the campus. Older now, thinner. The years had carved lines into his face, silver into his hair. He wore no suit, no tie, just a plain shirt, and that same calm stillness that had always made him seem out of place in the noise of the world. Daniel Carter. For a second, I couldn't move. He hadn't reached out in years. No letters, no calls, not even a rumor of where he'd gone. I had convinced myself he was gone for good. Another ghost carried off by time. But there he was, standing quietly, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on Lily. He didn't wave. He didn't approach. He just watched her, pride and peace etched into every line of his face. Lily followed my gaze. When she saw him, she froze too. "Mama?" she whispered. "I see him," I said softly. We started walking toward him, but halfway there, he shook his head gently. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. He lifted his hand, just a small wave, and then turned to leave. "Wait," Lily called out. But he didn't stop. He walked slowly down the path, the sunlight catching his gray hair, until he disappeared into the crowd of strangers, just as quietly as he had entered our lives all those years ago. Lily's voice broke. "He didn't even say goodbye." I looked at her, my heart aching and full all at once. "He already did, sweetheart, a long time ago." We stood there for a moment, both of us staring at the space where he'd been. Then I took her hand, and together we walked back toward the car. As we drove home, the city passed by. The same streets, the same corners, the same flower stand that had once held our whole world. Someone new stood there now, selling roses in the sunlight. For a moment, I thought about stopping. Buying one? Maybe even leaving it somewhere quiet for him. When we got home, Lily went to her room, still holding her diploma. I sat by the window, the same one I used to stare out of when the world felt too big, and opened Michael's old journal. The pressed Lily was still there, now fragile and golden with age. Beside it, the letter and the key from Daniel, the last pieces of a story that had changed everything. I traced the edge of the flower and whispered, "You kept your promise." Outside, the wind moved softly through the trees, carrying the smell of spring, that same faint sweetness of daisies and rain. And for the first time, I didn't feel haunted by the past. I felt held by it. Because in the end, Daniel Carter didn't just change our lives with money or contracts or promises. He changed them with courage, with truth, with the kind of love that asks for nothing except a chance to make things right. He came into our lives by accident, or maybe by fate. I'm still not sure which. But I know this much. He came to buy a flower, but instead he planted a future, one that will never stop blooming. If this story touched something inside you, don't just move on. Tell me what part hit hardest. Would you forgive someone who ruined everything, if they gave everything to make it right? Share your thoughts below. Your words keep these stories alive. And if you believe in stories that remind us hope still exists, subscribe. Because every story we tell plants another seed for the next one to grow.